The HBO studio lights illuminated Bill Maher as he leaned back in his chair, his signature smirk spreading across his face. Sitting across from him was Karoline Leavitt, former press secretary to Donald Trump. Her neatly styled blonde hair and striking blue dress stood out against the dark studio background. The audience was already murmuring in anticipation. They knew a clash was coming. "You know what you are, Karoline?" Maher said, pointing his finger like an accusation. "You're just a talking point in a dress. You don't have original thoughts. You just echo whatever Trump tells you." The liberal crowd erupted with laughter and applause. The panelists smiled in agreement. Even the camera crew seemed to sense something big, focusing in closer. What happened next, however, would flip the show on its head and turn a 27-year-old guest into the center of national conversation. Karoline didn't react with outrage. Instead, she smiled. Before we continue with this remarkable exchange, hit that like button if you're ready to see Bill Maher get thoroughly challenged, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future political face dash-offs. To truly appreciate the weight of this moment, it's important to understand who these individuals are and what was at stake that night. For over 20 years, Bill Maher has dominated late-night television as a leading voice of liberal commentary. His HBO program, Real Time, is more than just a talk show. It's a platform for progressives to affirm their views and mock those they disagree with. At 68, Maher has built his persona around being the brutally honest truth-teller. Often using humor to paint conservatives as ignorant or outdated, Maher frequently invites young conservative women onto his show, believing it makes for easy TV. He takes on the role of the seasoned liberal veteran, explaining reality to a supposedly misinformed Republican. While the audience cheers him on, this is his comfort zone, and he's rarely challenged within it. With millions of fans and an online following that amplifies every quote, Maher holds the kind of cultural influence that can shift public opinion or political careers with a single segment. But Karoline Leavitt isn't a typical guest. At only 27, she has already been through political battles that would test anyone's resilience. She served as Trump's press secretary during some of the most turbulent chapters of his presidency. She's faced hostile media, managed crises, and stood firm in defense of one of the most polarizing figures in American politics. Hailing from a working-class background in New Hampshire, Karoline's rise hasn't been due to privilege. She climbed the ranks from intern to senior roles in government through determination. Her Catholic faith isn't just a campaign slogan, it's a core part of her identity. Most importantly, Karoline came to the show prepared. She had done her research on Maher's past shows, statements, and vulnerabilities. This wasn't just another panel debate. This was a cultural clash. Entrenched liberal Hollywood versus the rising conservative youth movement. Maher represented a media elite, convinced it understands what's best for Americans. Karoline stood for a generation unwilling to be talked down to. To Maher, it was just another night to score points. To Karoline, it was a rare chance to challenge the narrative in live television. For months, the media had painted her as just another Trump spokesperson. Tonight she had the opportunity to prove them wrong, but she was entering a hostile environment. Maher's studio, Maher's crowd, Maher's terms. What no one expected was that Karoline had spent several days preparing. For this very exchange, she brought notes, clips, and evidence. She didn't just plan to defend herself. She intended to confront what she saw as the media's double standards. The stage was set. The atmosphere in the studio was tense. Maher opened with his usual commentary, taking shots at Trump and conservatives. The audience was already primed when he welcomed Karoline Leavitt. He leaned in, confident. "So, Karoline," he began, "you were Trump's press secretary during some chaotic times. Do you ever think you were defending the indefensible?" The other panelessa, Democratic strategist, and a self-proclaimed anti-Trump Republican, murked. The crowd expected a conservative meltdown, but Karoline's reply shifted the energy. Instantly. "I defended the truth," she said calmly, "something your show hasn't done in a very long time." Gasps filled the room. The tension was immediate. Maher raised his eyebrows. It was rare for anyone to confront him so directly. On his own set. "Excuse me?" he said with a forced laugh. My show has exposed lies and hypocrisy for 2 decades. We verify everything. Do you? Karoline asked. Because I've got some examples you might want to explain. The other guests shifted in their seats. This wasn't going as planned. Maher pushed harder. Let's be real. You spent 2 years defending a man who misled the country about the election, downplayed COVID, and tore this nation apart. How do you sleep at night? Applause broke out. The panelists nodded in agreement. It looked like Maher had her boxed in, but Karoline didn't hesitate. You want to talk about lies, Bill? Let's start with how you dismissed the Hunter Biden laptop as Russian propaganda, or how you ridiculed those who questioned the origins of COVID, or how you said the border crisis was just a political stunt. Want me to keep going? The room fell silent again. Maher's expression tightened. He wasn't used to specific rebuttals. That's different, he said awkwardly. We were following expert consensus. No, Karoline said. You were following a narrative, the same one you always promote. The Democratic strategist jumped in, sensing Maher needed backup. This is typical of Trump supporters deflecting criticism by going after the media. It's a tactic used by authoritarian regimes. Some applause followed, but it lacked the earlier enthusiasm. The audience was beginning to reconsider. Then the Republican guest chimed in. Karoline, I've been a conservative my whole life, but Trump betrayed our party. How can you support someone who tried to overturn an election? Now it was 3 against 1. The camera showed Karoline surrounded by unfriendly faces and a crowd poised against her. The moment was designed for her to falter. Instead, she leaned in, her voice unwavering. You want to talk about undermining elections? Let's talk about 2016. Let's talk about how your side pushed the Russia hoax for 4 years. About how you called Trump illegitimate from the beginning. Maher tried to cut her off, but Karoline kept going. She turned to the anti-Trump Republican. And you've built a career by criticizing Trump so you could stay relevant on shows like this. When was the last time you actually defended conservative values instead of just tearing down other conservatives? The man looked stunned. He opened his mouth but had nothing to say. Maher had had enough. You know what, Karoline? Said, raising his voice. I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. I've interviewed presidents, Nobel laureates, the smartest minds on the planet. And you know what I see when I look at you? The room held its breath. I see someone who doesn't think independently. You're not offering insight. You're repeating someone else's script. A mouthpiece, a puppet, just a face delivering pre-written lines. The crowd roared with approval. The panelists nodded again. The camera zoomed in, waiting for Karoline's expression to crack. You're just a talking point in a dress, Maher added. And frankly, it's embarrassing to you, to women, and to this country. Applause filled the studio. Maher leaned back satisfied. He thought the exchange was over, but Karoline wasn't done. As the noise died down, she calmly opened her folder and pulled out several pages. Her movement was precisely deliberate. It shifted the tone in the room. Bill, she said evenly, just made a serious mistake. The tension in the studio was palpable. Even Maher seemed slightly unsure now. Oh, really? He replied, dismissively. And what mistake is that? Karoline looked straight into the camera. Then back at Maher. You just gave me the perfect chance to show Americans exactly who you are. The room went silent. You could hear the equipment buzzing. And then Karoline Leavitt began. She held up a page for the cameras to see. Here's a screenshot from your 2020 episode, she began. You said, and, I quote, anyone suggesting COVID came from a lab is pushing dangerous conspiracy theories. The audience shifted. Where was this going? You mocked Senator Tom Cotton, called him ignorant, claimed people like him were a threat to public safety. Maher's grin faded. That was the consensus at the time, he said. Was it Karoline interjected, or were you just repeating the approved narrative? She held up a second. Document. Because just 3 months later, you changed your position. Suddenly, lab leak theories were worth discussing. Suddenly, you were asking why those questions had been silenced. The studio was now stone silent. Even Maher's most loyal fans didn't know how to respond. You spent years labeling Trump and his supporters as election deniers. You said questioning election outcomes was an attack on democracy itself. You called it the big lie. That's right, Bill replied. Karoline's tone was firm now. Then explain this, she said, holding up a screenshot. November 2016, your show. You said Trump's election was illegitimate because of Russian interference. You brought on guests claiming he won with Putin's help. Bill tried to respond, but she continued without pause. December 2016, you argued the Electoral College should ignore the voters and choose Hillary. You called Trump illegitimate and claimed he didn't really win. She lifted another screenshot. January 2017, you supported Democrats who objected to certifying Trump's electoral votes. You called them heroes for standing up for democracy. The studio was so quiet, the hum of the air conditioning was noticeable. For 4 straight years, Bill, she continued, you questioned Trump's legitimacy. You pushed a Russian collusion narrative that turned out to be false. You backed efforts to reverse the 2016 results. Karoline stood, her presence now commanding the room. So, Bill, when you spent 4 years denying Trump's victory, were you an election denier? When you pushed the Russia narrative, were you spreading the big lie? When you supported overturning votes in 2017, were you undermining democracy? The audience was frozen. A few appeared visibly stunned. Even the camera felt still. Or is it only election denial when Republicans do it? Bill opened his mouth, but said nothing. You want to talk about talking points? She pressed. You just spent 5 minutes accusing me of parroting opinions. But everything you say comes straight from the Democratic Party script. She began counting on her fingers. COVID came from a wet market till it didn't. Hunter's laptop was Russian disinformation till it wasn't. The border is secure except when it's not. Men can be women unless you're J.K. Rowling. It's defund the police, no. Wait. Fund them. Build back better, actually. The Inflation Reduction Act. With each example, her tone grew firmer. The audience grew more silent. You shift your beliefs depending on what Democrats need you to think that week. And you call me a talking point? A Democratic strategist tried to interrupt. This is just whataboutism, oh Karoline said, locking eyes with him. This is accountability, something you're clearly unfamiliar with. She pulled out another sheet of paper. Let's talk about you. 3 years ago, you wrote an op-ed claiming border walls don't work and border enforcement is racist. Last month, you praised Biden's new border policies. So, which version is the real you? The man's face went pale. He hadn't expected her to come with receipts. The never-Trump Republican chimed in. This is why the GOP must move on. From Trump? Move on to what? Karoline turned to him. Back to losing gracefully, like before Trump came along. Back to letting Democrats steamroll us while you sip cocktails with media elites? She pointed directly at him. You've been on this show 12 times in the last 2 years. How many invites did you get when you actually defended conservative principles? 0? You're only here now because you attack other Republicans. She turned back to Maher, who sat silently. The great liberal comedian completely dismantled by a 27-year-old woman, and everyone here knows it. You call me a talking point in address, Bill. But here's the difference. I brought facts, proof, and clear examples of your double standards. You came with recycled insults from 2016. She leaned forward, her voice now just above a whisper. But the studio mics caught every word. I don't repeat what Trump tells me. I think for myself. I do the research. I stand for what I believe in. You, on the other hand, are exactly what you accuse me of, being a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party who shifts positions when it's politically convenient. The silence felt endless. Bill looked around for support, but his fellow panelists stared at the floor. The audience didn't know whether to applaud, boo, or walk out. You know what's really sad? Karoline said as she gathered her notes. You used to be different. You used to challenge both sides. You used to think independently. Somewhere along the way, you became what you once criticized, a partisan voice blinded by bias. She stood, adjusted her blue dress. Thanks for having me, Bill. This was fun. And with that, Karoline Leavitt walked off the set, leaving behind a speechless panel, stunned crowd, and what would become one of the most viral moments in political television. Bill Maher didn't say a word for 10 full seconds before the broadcast cut to commercial. The HBO studio erupted in quiet chaos. Maher remained frozen in his seat, his trademark smirk gone, replaced by a blank expression. The audience murmured with uncertainty. They'd come expecting to watch a young conservative crumble but had instead witnessed their liberal icon brought down. The Democratic strategist scrolled frantically on his phone, likely searching for a way to spin the segment. The never-Trump Republican looked as though he wished he could disappear. Even the camera crew whispered among themselves. Nothing like this had ever happened on Maher's set, but the real eruption started online. Within minutes of Karoline's exit, clips flooded social media. In what was likely a panic move, HBO's own social team posted the exchange on Twitter, unknowingly fueling the fire. The first viral clip, Karoline's talking point and address comeback, perfect 30-second edit. Maher's smug jab followed by her calm takedown. Within an hour, it had 50,000 retweets. And that was just the beginning. Conservative Twitter lit up like fireworks. Charlie Kirk tweeted, "Wow. At CLEA, VIT NH just did what every conservative has dreamed of for years. Destroyed Bill Maher with facts and proof. This is how you fight back." He attached a highlight reel of her best moments, set to dramatic music. It racked up over 200,000 likes in just 3 hours. Ben Shapiro, known for his own factual takedowns, couldn't hide his excitement. This is what happens when a conservative comes prepared. At CLEA, VITTNH brought receipts, stayed composed, and took down 20 years of smug liberalism in 10 minutes. Masterclass. Even Elon Musk shared the clip, writing just one word: destroyed. Meanwhile, liberal Twitter was having a meltdown. Some claimed Karoline had been disrespectful. One verified journalist tweeted, "This is exactly what's wrong with Trump supporters. No respect for civil discourse." Maher tried to have a real discussion, and she turned it into a spectacle. The replies were brutal. Civil discourse? He called her a talking point in address. Spectacle. You mean when she backed up every point with facts? Bill spent 5 minutes insulting her, then got demolished. Others tried to fact-check her statements. That backfired fast. Each attempt was met with video clips and screenshots proving she was right. One especially embarrassing moment came when a CNN contributor tweeted, "Maher never said the laptop was Russian disinformation." Within minutes, a video compilation surfaced showing Maher doing exactly that, set to circus music. Mainstream outlets struggled. They couldn't ignore the viral moment. It was everywhere. But they couldn't admit that a young conservative had upstaged one of their most respected voices. CNN went with rising tensions on political panels. MSNBC titled it, "Conservative Guest Disrupts Panel Discussion." It carefully edited out Karoline's key rebuttals, making her look combative instead of composed. Fox News, however, was all over it. Tucker Carlson opened his show with the clip and spent 10 minutes breaking it down. This is what happens when the liberal media bubble bursts. Bill Maher thought he had the upper hand, but Karoline Leavitt proved he's been skating by on old talking points. Internet had a field day. One meme showed a video game-style face-off Karoline launching fact bombs at a stunned Maher. Another showed Maher's shocked face with the caption, "When you realize your talking points are talking points, but the most damaging?" A side-by-side of Maher's past statements on the COVID lab, Leak highlighting his contradictions and Karoline calling him out on them. Even some liberals acknowledged she had made valid points. On TikTok, young conservative women adopted talking point in address as a battle cry. The soundbite became symbolic, especially for women tired of being dismissed in media spaces beyond the theatrics. Political observers saw something deeper. For years, liberal talk show hosts had the advantage: familiar studios, supportive audiences. And the assumption they were always the most informed, Karoline shattered that dynamic. She proved that with preparation and confidence. Conservatives could not only hold their own but dominate. Republican strategists took note. One tweeted, "This is the blueprint. Don't show up to be polite. Show up to win. Bring proof. Control." The narrative Democrats, on the other hand, were alarmed. If their top media voices couldn't handle one well-prepared guest, what did that say about their arguments? Donald Trump, unsurprisingly, was pleased. He posted on Truth Social. Karoline Leavitt just crushed it on Maher's show. She exposed the lies with facts and showed how weak the fake news really is. She's a star. But the real message went beyond Trump. Karoline had shown that you don't need Trump himself to challenge the liberal media. A new generation of conservatives had arrived, and they were ready for the fight ahead.